Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 280 of the Nope Coach podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Culberg. The visibility game is rigged. So, this is one for the entrepreneurs, or as I lovingly refer to, wannapreneurs in the house, because perhaps visibility is holding you back from, fully launching. And I'm welcoming today Chloé Nwangwu. Did I say it right? Yes!
Correct.
I ask people how to say their name, I practice it, and then I hit record and my mind goes blank. So, Chloé, visibility, game is rigged. Where are we going to start with this?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay. So I think the first thing that I will say is this, that we are all under the assumption that the things that we pay attention to are neutral or fair, right?
Oh,
And it turns out not really, not really. That we've all been conditioned to allocate our attention, and not just in ways that are sort of like time saving and focus inducing, right? So, like, not just in the ways that allow us to, like, not stare at our spoon while we're pouring ourselves a bowl of cereal and, like, consider the leaf dew of the universe, right? Like, that's not the only ways in which we've been conditioned to allocate our attention. We've also been conditioned to allocate our attention in patently discriminatory ways. A really great example of this is a phenomenon called the racial attention deficit. And this comes out of some research that was done in 2021, so pretty recently. And these researchers were able to empirically demonstrate that white Americans are 33% more likely to overlook their Black peers. And that's even when they've been incentivized to pay attention to those peers and when they know that that peer can help them with a pressing problem. So when both of those things are true, the deficit in attention is 33%. And yeah, that study was necessarily limited. So it only looked at race as a binary. It only looked in America. It didn't look at gender really or any other sort of overarching identities, right? Um, but even when you're just looking at those very specific, tiny variations of those variables, you see that there is a deficit. You see that there's a gap in the amount of attention that certain folks will pay to other people.
that's
So,
fascinating. That's fascinating. It's
yeah.
just making me think currently, I don't watch a lot of television. I prefer streaming services because I can't stand ads. But my daughter and I are
Fair.
obsessed with Survivor. Australian Survivor is the best. Just I'm gonna own it. Like, if you haven't seen it, a couple of my Canadian friends, I was like, you've got to watch Australian Survivor. It's really good. Anyway, they do have ads because it's a TV show. And one of the ads is speaking to the representation or the lack of representation of people with disabilities on television. And it was showing one company, which is Amy, which is a insurance company, that the person who sings the song, I'm not going to, everyone save your ears, it's fine, I'm not going to sing it, but if you're Australian and you heard the song, you would know. But it's being sung by a blind girl now to increase the representation. And it was funny because, like, I'll have to own my own bias here. I'd seen the ad because I can see it in my mind, like the guy was cheap on his insurance and his car broke down. I can picture the ad. I've heard the woman's voice, but I didn't notice that she was blind, and she's standing there with a dog, like a seeing eye dog, and it was quite obvious. And it wasn't until this other ad that's talking about representation of disabled people on television, in media, in advertising, because of up to 20% of the population having a disability, seen or unseen. I
Yeah.
was like, wow, like, yeah, I wouldn't have noticed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, right? That oh, there's so many things I could say here. There's so many things I could say here. I don't even know where to start. I think, okay, I'm moving my mic. That's where I'm starting. Um, so, okay, where do I even start here? So, first thing I'll say is that that is not an unusual experience, and it actually points to something that's really key here. That this tendency to overlook or underappreciate, right? Or under recognize, which is the term that I use, right?
Yes.
This isn't necessarily malicious, right? We've all just been conditioned this way, right? And at the source of this propensity are these cognitive biases or just sort of like learned brain chemistry, if you will, right? That sort of encourage those things to happen, right? Um, so that's the first thing that I'll say. The second thing that I'll say is that I tend to speak about it as under recognition instead of under representation, right? And there are so many reasons for this. Um, but one of the primary ones is merely because when we think about underrepresentation, we think about it as a situation that just happens to be, right? Oh, folks just happen to be
Yes.
underrepresented, right? It just happens to be that there aren't many folks who are disabled who are depicted in media or ads or what have you, right? Under recognition is different because it implies an active agent, right? It implies a doer. And so in implying that doer, it also makes the next step really obvious, right? You recognize them. So those are the two things that I would say just to what you said right now.
Yeah, no, I love that. And and then there is a difference too. Have you ever watched the are you paying attention video and you've got to count the people who how many times they pass the ball?
Oh, I have seen that one, and there's another one where like literally a man in a gorilla suit
Yes, yes, that's the one. And
walks
then have
by.
you seen the
Yeah.
sequel to that? So they did a second video a number of years later, and I was like, I'm ready. I'm waiting for the gorilla. I'm paying attention. But then at the end they showed, and I won't spoil it in case everyone hasn't watched the sequel. I was like,
Yeah.
how did I miss that? Like, and I love how you say under recognition because it was right there. And then later on, you're like, oh, so how many times do things happen that you're sure you remember it and I've got perfect recall or whatever. And it's like, no, it was right there and you
Yeah.
just didn't see it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's actually another ad that I saw. It was a British ad for I think it was like making sure that you don't cycle under the influence or something like that. And it somehow started off as like a murder mystery, like a very much who done it. And like all the people are standing there with like the possible weapons of the murder, and the murdered person's on the floor and the clock is near them. And they change about 31 things
Oh,
throughout
I've
this
seen that one
entire
too.
thing.
Yeah, they changed
It's
over like
incredible.
30 or
Like,
24 or a high number of things, the
yeah,
color of the carpet, the shape of the type of
yeah.
flowers, the
Like
actual
some of
person
the
who was
weapons.
murdered.
Yeah, like the clock that was there, the vase of flowers, like whole wall hangings, like it was wild. And I remember seeing this and being like, okay, I know that that wasn't the way it was. And like, even for all the things that I've caught up, I counted up, even the fact that I am, in fact, someone who is trained in behavioral science. Like, I know to watch for things. I know to watch for these things. For all of that training, for all of that stuff, I still miss like 10 things. Incredible.
Yes.
It's so good.
So, for anyone listening who's like, okay, I'm on the wavelength with you, like the visibility game is rigged, what would you suggest for them, especially for people who are, new in business or starting in business? Sometimes it can be a bit of a like, why bother? I'm going to
Mm,
be real talk here. It's like we put a lot of
yeah.
effort in, and it's like, oh, wow, 3 people watched it. And one of them was my sister.
Oh no. Oh goodness. Okay, so this is so incredibly relatable. I understand, believe you me. And so what I would say to this is a few things. One, obviously there is hope, otherwise I wouldn't be here. Right? And that at the end of the day, under recognition is just a behavior challenge. That's all it is. And we have several schools of thought and like scientific traditions that deal with how to change behavior, right? So the first thing that I would say is that when you're looking to fix this problem, right? You want to look at the principles of behavioral science or behavior change. Now, if you are a business leader, if you are an entrepreneur or someone within that space who is listening, here are some things that you may want to consider. Um, First, you are going to want to understand what phase of visibility you happen to be in, right? Because each phase of visibility has certain things that you want to focus on, and each phase of visibility also has certain parameters or contexts that are helpful to your flourishing, right? It's very easy to be doing the right thing at the wrong time, right? And
Ooh,
this is something that
yes.
I have seen again and again and again and again. And so I'll say that the almost the most important thing is to understand currently where you are located as far as your journey of visibility is concerned. Um, Start there. And then the next step that I would say, because I'm now not even sure what next thing that I would say is that once you understand what phase you are in, what the focus is, and like the sort of parameters that are necessary for your flourishing, this is where you get to focus and begin to build on what I call your recognition infrastructure, right? And your recognition infrastructure deals with one, primarily, ensuring that you are able to position yourself as the obvious choice for whatever this thing is, right? Whether or not you are a business, you are an organization, you're maybe a political candidate, maybe like all the things that you could possibly be, you want to be the obvious choice, right? The next thing is that you want to ensure then that you are an opportunity magnet, right? It's one thing to be the obvious choice, but if nobody sees you, if nobody notices you, right, then no point to this, right? So you want
Hmm.
to ensure that you are positioned to be an opportunity magnet. Once you have both of those things, then you can start to operationalize all of that um, in a way that systematizes the interest of others and monitors it so that you can catch when something is not quite working the way that it used to. And that's sort of an early indicator that context is about to shift. And so the things that people are focusing on are likely about to shift as well, right? So those are some preliminary things that I would suggest. Of course, I have resources for all of these things. So please feel free to reach out if you have questions.
I love that. And we're almost at time, but I just want to cycle back to what you said about doing the right thing at the wrong time.
Mm,
And I think for many of us, when we're new at business or new at something, as you said, you could be wanting to be a political candidate, you could be wanting to start a nonprofit, you could be whatever it is. What we often do, which seems like a good idea at the time, we look at somebody who we admire, who's killing it, and go, I'm going to do what they're doing. But we
yep.
don't take into account that they already have an established audience, they already have an established team. Like someone was asking
Yep.
me for something the other day, and I was like, I appreciate that you want that, and I can totally understand. And they're
Yep.
like, oh, these other entrepreneurs have all this. I'm like, yeah, and these other entrepreneurs have teams of a dozen or more. And I
Yeah.
have a team of me plus somebody who I subcontracts us 3 hours a month. So,
Yeah.
don't try and be all the things for all the people and have it, like, yes, I want to be accessible and yes, I want to appeal to many as people as possible. But I don't have the time, the resources, or the energy to do
Yeah.
multiple things, and and then people go, oh, you're not accessible, which is interesting, coming back to the visibility game being rigged and being under recognized
Yeah.
and stuff, but also
Yeah.
recognizing your own capabilities and funds that you have for this, and knowing that some people you're just maybe not going to be a fit for at this stage in your journey, and they might circle back, or they're free to go find someone else, because you're going to get
Yes.
emails all the time saying, I can do this for you, I can do that for you, and here's the at a cost. And then you think, well, what's the point?
Oh my gosh. No, literally every yes to this, every single possible yes to this. And in fact, right, that borrowing tactics that you mentioned is in fact a hallmark of one of the phases of visibility, right? So if that's something that you're doing, chances are pretty high that you're in what I call the stuck phase of visibility. And there are certain things that you want to think about if that is the
Oh,
case. That's the first thing I'll say to that. And the second thing I'll say is that yeah, your resources are necessarily limited. So you want to be aware of that and you want to account for all of that in everything that you do. Time, energy, money. These are resources, they're necessarily limited. And as an under-recognized person, they are likely especially limited for you. That is by design. So you want to be aware of that as you're doing all the things that you're doing.
I love
Yeah.
that. So, Chloe, what do you do and where can people find you? People probably got their whistle wet, like wet the whistle. They're like, oh my gosh, I need to know more about this. So let the listeners know how they can find out more about this from you.
Yes, absolutely. Hello, I am Chloé Nwangwu, the brand scientist, and I run NobiWorks, a brand visibility lab that services and works with under-recognized movement makers, thought-leading brands, and hidden figures. Translation, I am a visibility advisor to hidden figures, and I use science to ensure that you are impossible to ignore. If you are interested in finding out more about this, in getting some of the resources that I mentioned here today, you can go to nobiworks.com, and I'm sure we can include a
Oh,
link in the
spell it
show
out. I don't
notes.
do show notes. So
Oh, just
spell it
kidding.
out.
Mistakes were made.
That's
So
all
N is in
good.
Nancy, N is in Nancy, O for orange, B for boy, I for igloo, W for whiskey, O for orange, R for Rachel, K for kangaroo, S for Stephanie.com. And you'll be able to get in contact with me there. Let me know that Suzanne sent you, and I'll make sure that you have access to all of the resources that we mentioned
I
today.
love that so much. And I love how you don't know the phonetic alphabet because neither do I. And whenever I have to
Oh,
spell something out, my husband, who knows it perfectly, is always in the background going, November, kilo, or whatever is the right word. And I was like, the
happened to me.
person got my message.
They
But seriously,
understood. Like,
as always, if you can't find a resource based on our, Englishing, send me an email, info@suzanneculberg.com. I'll hook you up. But yeah, one of my limited resources, Chloe, is I don't do show notes because I do a daily show and I wonder if people read them anyway. So for those of you who are regular listeners, I have an experiment that might be coming out soon. So, because I want to see what do people pay attention to and what do they
uh,
not. Thank you so
I
much for
cannot wait
joining
for
me.
this.
Talk to you soon. Bye for now.